Pretty much every practice that I talk with, whether it's a small 1 or 2 doc practice all the way up to the big ACOs with 50 and 100 and even 1,000 doctors or whatever, we almost always find them using what we call the two-stage approach to patient collection. So phase one is in-house efforts, right? And of course, you could have a billing company do this if you wanted to, but either way, whether you do it or somebody else does it, you send out a bill. 30 days later, a bill, maybe another past due letter, maybe another bill, maybe a phone call or a past due letter, another bill, another past due. That's kind of all you got, right? Bills and calls and maybe a letter or something like that. At some point, a lot of folks will give up and toss it over the wall to a collection agency, cross their fingers, kind of hope for the best, hope that Guido will give them a call and rough them up a little bit, and hopefully they pay. That's what we call a two-stage approach to patient collections. Let me show you what's wrong with the two-stage approach. There's all sorts of things wrong, but let me just go into kind of the biggest systemic problems. The biggest one, of course, is who has time for all that? Who has time to make all those phone calls? If you look at all the phone calls you have to make, and again, I don't care if you're a 1 doc practice or a 100 doctor ACO, if you look at all the calls you've got to make that are past due, 30, 60, 90 days old, your team, even if you have a dedicated team, they only have so much time to actually make all those phone calls, lick and stuff and stamp and get out all those letters. And we find that of all the calls that actually do get made, watch this, a whopping 70% of them are just voicemail, believe it or not. Basically, you're paying a human to leave a bunch of voicemails. Another issue is training, of course. Most people aren't trained to make collection calls. Another big issue is personality type. It's very rare to find a person who likes to make the dreaded collection calls, right? And to deal with all the sob stories they're going to say. So there's all kinds of problems I won't go into right now, but the big one is just grab your aging report. Really, this is a real exercise. I double dog dare you to grab your aging report, a patient side only, and just do a little bit of math and see between the 30-day bucket to the 60-day bucket, how much money was actually removed out. 10%, 20%, 30%? Between the 60 to 90 day, how much money was removed? That is, how effective is your system actually working? When you actually make some calls, if you can get around to them, how's it working out for you? The second big problem with the two-stage approach is, that is in the second stage, the collections piece. You may or may not know this or not, but the dirty little secret of the percentage-based collection agencies, and I mean all of them. I'm sure you have a nice collection agency. I'm not ridiculing them. I'm not condemning them. I'm just explaining how the industry works. And yes, I mean yours too. All collection agencies that charge a percentage work like this. Because they're charging a percentage, they cherry pick their accounts. It's called skimming or marking or scoring in that industry. Basically, they have thousands and thousands of accounts pouring in every single day. More people have debts right now than ever before. And they have more people to call than they can possibly call on. And so they look at for the balances that are the biggest, that are the easiest, that are the youngest, that have the best credit. And frankly, the companies that are paying them the most. If they're getting 20% or 30% or 50%, they're a company, and they don't have time to make all the calls. So the scary kind of dirty secret, I guess, is that the average balance turned over to a collection agency this year is $1,543. $1,543. Isn't that amazing? That kind of makes sense now why your little $200 balances don't really show up on their radar very much. So what that means is, of all the money that you turn over to them, let's say Dr. Jones, for instance, turns over $10,000, only so many of those are actually going to get contacted. And then, so they typically bring in about 5 or 10% in the medical world. In medical collections, collection agencies only bring in about 5 or 10% of the money. And then typically they want 20, 30, 40% of that. Let's put some numbers to that for just a moment. Again, let's say Dr. Jones turns over $10,000. And again, multiply it by however many doctors you have. It's all the same. 10% of that on the high side is going to be collected by your agency. So that's $1,000. They want 30% of it on average. That's $300. So think about that. You just collected 700. That's it. Out of $10,000. And this was your backstop. This was your safety plan. This was your safety net. If your team can't collect it, you're tossing it over to an agency, and you're collecting pennies on the dollar. it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So here's kind of the big conclusion with the two-stage approach. And this is both depressing and encouraging at the same time. You're writing off far too many dollars that have really never been pursued by your team or your agency. But there is a better way. There's a much, much better way where instead of bringing in 5 or 10%, I'm actually going to show you how to bring in 50, 60, 70, 80% of your money. I'm not kidding. It's much easier than you think. You're just going to have to stop thinking and making excuses towards people are broke and they don't have any money. They have money. They're just not paying you necessarily. So this is a graphic of the 4-stage escalated approach to patient cash flow. This is what we recommend. Instead of using the 2-stage, this is the 4-stage approach. So this is how it works. When you combine all this together, here's what you get. The faithful just need a bill. The reliable, right? The dutiful, they just need a bill. The distracted, they need a series of friendly reminders. The disrespectful, they need a series of third-party soft demand. The hardball, they need a live call from a pro. Another way to think about this is you have your billing stage, pre-collections, soft collections, then hard collections. Do you see why it's 4 stages and why it needs to be escalated? We want to give them every chance to pay before we have to toss it over to a hardball collection agency and pay out a big percentage and have the account cherry-picked anyways. So the first 3 stages, we want to do everything we can to get them to pay you, to pay in full, to get their attention, to communicate expectation, to reestablish respect. And if they ignore phase 1, then move to phase 2. If they ignore that and dismiss it, well then escalate it. Get a little tougher and move to the next one. It makes sense? It's kind of a mountain. It's an escalated approach. And if you do these prompts weekly, here's what you get. When you send out your first bill, you'll probably get 40, 50, 60% of the money in that first month. Then if you send out weekly reminders, then you'll get about half of your money. If you send out weekly soft collection demands from a licensed agency, you'll get about half the money. And then the last group is really tough to collect from, so you'll only get 20 or 30, 40%. When you actually do the math there, you'll end up with about 80, 90, 95% of your money. It's amazing how much of that patient revenue you can have coming in here. We find that it's somewhere around $5,000 per doctor per month if you'll use this system. $5,000 per doctor per month of additional revenue. What I mean by that is from stage 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, and 4, $5,000 extra dollars a month that most doctors are just writing off. So there you go. Escalate faster, use various stimuli, and do it more frequency, right? With more frequency. And of course, I'd love to be in front of you right now having a conversation about this. And I would love to ask you, what do you think about these strategies? Is this something you like? Is this something you would like to try out for yourself? And again, I typically get one of a few responses. Yes, Brad, we're already doing something like this, but maybe we could do it better. Maybe we're not as effective as you, or maybe we could do it as maybe a bit more cost effective than this system you're proposing here. Sometimes people will say all kinds of things. Probably the thing we hear the most is, who has time? All this sounds great, Brad, but we don't have time barely to get the statements out or make a phone call, much less do it weekly. And so that's where I'd like to suggest there's apps for all of this stuff that I can point you in the right direction if you want to email me, and I can kind of play walking yellow pages for you and let you know that I'm friends with so many of the vendors in the medical space, and I've kind of vetted them of who's who and who's good and who's not so good, and who fits with a smaller practice versus who fits with a larger practice that may need more customization or whatnot. So if you want to email me, I can help you point in the right direction. But for right now, I just want to say there's apps for all this. If you want to find out more about us or want to learn more about how to retrain your patient base to actually pay you, watch our short video at ProfitwiseSolutions.com. I think you'll absolutely love it. Again, it's ProfitwiseSolutions.com. We'll talk to you soon.